I've got 8 great-grandchildren, and we go out to Dairy Queen, incidentally, on Sunday. We got a little problem with what they're serving in that particular place, but I think they're getting the word when I bring out my own Coca-Cola to the. But he does that. He cuts across generations. I mean, what Don loves the human race, and it shows, and the human race loves him. I mean, he understands people. He understands a product like Coke like nobody can. I mean, he feels it, and he's just a very, very remarkable guy that, came off a farm up near in northwest Iowa, and came down to Creighton University. Used to broadcast football games at the University of Nebraska when the rights to the game sold for $25,000, and Don didn't know anything about football, but he worked cheap. And he actually had a television program on the first station in Omaha, and it was called Keogh's Coffee Corner. It's all spelled with K's, and it started at noon, and for 15 minutes he interviewed people. I've got an old tape of this, and then he was followed at 12:15 by Johnny Carson, of all people. That's where Johnny Carson got his start. And every time I would see him, Don, when I'd come back to Coca-Cola meetings, he said, "Whatever happened to that Carson fellow?" He said, did he ever make it in television? But Johnny loved Don, incidentally. I mean, I have never met anybody. He went on the Washington Post board. Kay Graham was asking me about a suggestion for a board membership, and I suggested Don, and she said that was one of the greatest things I ever did for her. That people they loved him, they trusted him, they liked his advice, but they liked how he made them feel. I mean, you couldn't have had a personification of the Coke brand better than Don.
Well, we're very fortunate that to have a leader like Don, and he serves on our board, and we certainly, in terms of what he's contributed and continues to contribute to the business, is just really, we're very, very fortunate to have that kind of person that really is a personification of the brand, as you said. So, and his book is really simple, but a wonderfully written manuscript and book about how you can fail, and it's so easy to fail if you do those things that he's outlined. So
yeah, you really want to reverse engineer your life. My partner, Charlie Munger, who's 84 and drinks a lot of Cokes every day too, Charlie says, "All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there." And I'm still trying to figure out what Charlie's telling me all the time. But Don is telling you that in this business about how to fail. I mean, there's so many things in life are really just habits, and there's habits of success and habits of failure. And if you engineer out of your life the habits of failure, being critical, selfish, stingy, humorless, all those things, if you get all of those out of your life, what's left is success. It's not very complicated.
That's right. And and you've heard me talk about how we need to ensure that we avoid habitual waste. And it's again about trying to absolutely re-engineer the way we think about some of the things and do them in a different way. And then we're going to get the fuel that I talked about so we can keep our brands moving ahead. Another great quote from this last year's annual report, your Berkshire Hathaway's, quote, "You only learn who has been swimming naked when the tide goes out. And what we are now witnessing is an ugly sight." Yeah. Unquote.
Yeah, it is true. Wall Street does go crazy. I mean, from time to time, and you get these bubbles, and in this time you had it with extraordinary leverage on instruments that people didn't understand, like so-called CDOs and CDOs squared. And the tide has gone out, and we've not only found that that some of the swimmers have been swimming naked, but some of the lifeguards have been swimming naked too. It's been an ugly sight, but it happens. And the real trick is sort of just retaining your sanity when these periodic bubbles come along, although I don't like to be too harsh on the subject of bubbles because I was born on August 30th, 1930, which means I was conceived on November 30th, 1929. And if you think about it, my dad was a stock salesman, and the crash took place in October, and there really wasn't any reason to go out and do much selling of stocks. And they didn't have television in those days, so if you stayed home, you know, what happened was you had another boy 9 months later. So I'm a product of a disaster in the stock market. So you want to remember, little good comes out of everything or lifestyle. I like to think so.
Well, I think it's time to get over to you for some questions. I know you've got a lot of questions, and I think the value of this is really having this dialogue. So who wants to go first?
Muhtar talks about the expansion of the middle class globally, and I've heard Warren talk about the recession possibly in the United States. What I'm seeing is a decline in the lifestyle of the American people, and my question is whether that's going to continue to decline or find a bottom somewhere, and where do you think that bottom is?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there's no question that lots and lots of people are getting squeezed between the decline in housing prices and what's happening with both heating oil and gasoline, and there's a great squeeze going on. But this country started, the first census was in 1790, and at that time we had a little less than 4 million people in the United States. There were 290 million people in China. There were 100 million people in Europe. They had similar climates. Those people were just as smart in China and Europe as they were here. The soil was good in all three places. But those 4 million people, you know, starting from scratch, built a country which, you know, has more than 25% of the world's GDP and the most prosperous country in the world. And they did it for came through various sort of fundamental reasons. Those reasons are still in place. And if you look at the 20th century, in the 20th century, the per capita GDP in real terms of the average American went up 7 for 1. There's never been a century like it in the history of the world. Now, during that period, we had the Great Recession, we had 2 world wars, we had the flu epidemic in 1918, we had the Cold War, we had atomic bombs, all kinds of things happened. But at the start of the century, the Dow Jones average was selling at 66. At the end, it was selling at 11,400 with those recessions, world wars, Vietnam, Korea, on top of all those things. We have a system that works. It doesn't work every day perfectly. It doesn't work every week or every year perfectly even, but it works over time. We have a rule of law, not perfect, but better than has ever existed any place else. We have a meritocracy, so the right people end up in the right jobs, making people more productive. And we have a market system. We produce the things that people want, and it works. So your kids will live better than you do, although my kids don't think they're living better than I do, but that's another... that's an isolated case. And your grandchildren will live better. You don't need to worry about this country long term. We are going to have, in my view, a longer and probably deeper recession than most people anticipate. But we've gone through lots of things in the past. And in the end, the American people get more productive. And when you get more productive, you turn on more things that are useful to people because the market system demands. It tells you what, not some centralized planner someplace, but the market system says this is what we want. And Americans come up with it. So I would bet on this country under all circumstances, but the next year can be tough. Mm-hmm. The way to think of it is this way. There's a fellow named, I think it was Peter Lynch, that said one time, buy stock in a company that's so good that an idiot can run it, because sooner or later one will.
Over here.
Now, I would just say that the country is a little like that, too.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Good. I have a question for you. You seem to be a mentor to a lot of business leaders, and a lot of people in this country tend to go to you for advice. Who did you go to for advice, or who was your mentor, or if you still have one?
Well, that's a terrific question, and I've been very lucky in my life. I thought of them as heroes rather than mentors, but they're the same thing. And the natural hero for any young person, the heroes are their parents. I mean, you're this tiny little thing. That's why the first years are so important. I mean, you're this little thing, and the whole world is those two big people around that give you food and warmth and all that sort of thing. So if you're lucky, you get somebody you don't get to pick them. But I had a dad in particular that was a hero to me the day I was born, and is still a hero to me. I had a teacher named Ben Graham. I named my first son after my dad and Ben Graham, and he was a terrific teacher for me. Don Keel was a terrific teacher for me. Tom Murphy, who's on our board, was a terrific teacher. My wife was a great teacher to me. I mean, she didn't have much to work with, but she she kept working, and so I've been very, very, very lucky in terms of the heroes I've run into. But I've never had one let me down. I mean, you're lucky in life when it works that way. And I urge that to the students I talk to all the time. You don't get a rerun button in life. And so you're going to have one time when your kids are young, and they're going to form their idea of the world at that time. So it's very, very important to get it right the first time. And you don't get any practice sessions. But luckily, I've had these teachers, mentors, heroes, whatever you'd like to call them, throughout my life. And I still have them. I put them on the board. I mean, Tom Murphy and Don Keel are on the Berkshire board because I learn something from them every time I'm around them. And you can learn the wrong things too, but I'm learning them from the right people, and I'm learning the right things. So if you tell me who your heroes are when you're young, I can tell you pretty much how you're going to turn out. And it's very important that you be a hero to your children, and that they have the right heroes, and I've been lucky.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time. Given the speculations and concerns around the presidential candidates and elections, what would be the one most important change you hope the new president brings to this country and to its economy?
What I would like to see is that this country, the federal government spends about 20% of GDP per year. They've done it under Republicans. They've done it under Democrats. I mean, it's what the American people demand. They may spend more on defense sometimes or anything. But if you look at the history post-World War II, it's been fairly close to that 20% of GDP that they spend. The question is who they get it from. Nobody wants it to come from them. And what we have had in recent years is less and less of the total amount needed to run the federal government come from guys like me, Forbes 400 types, and more come from people like you. And in my office, I did a survey. I asked everybody to take their federal income tax return and make the calculation what percentage they were paying to the federal government of their total income, counting payroll taxes and income taxes. My rate came out to 17.7%. Now, I don't have a tax planner, I don't have a tax shelter, I don't have anything. I just do my tax return at the end of the year. I've been doing them since I was 13 years old. My rate came out to 17.7%. The average for the rest of the office was 32.9%. We have shifted in the last 20 years the tax burden more and more away from the super rich to the rest of the country without them even knowing it, basically. I do hope that there is some change in who's paying for all the services that come along. When the system can stand some adjusting in that respect, in my view, and I hope it happens.